it would just bring the wrath of the world down around China's ears at a time when they're trying to recover from a depression, a deep depression in terms of real estate, of debt crisis, all their Belt and Road projects around the world, which cost $1 trillion. They lent the money to the countries and they're not paying it back. I mean, China's not in great shape. And then, of course, the tariffs by the Americans has also slowed down its economy. And so, I don't see a China wanting to grab a chess piece off the board that would be that expensive. I think it would bankrupt them and it would absolutely ruin them, ruin their trade.
Hello and welcome to Times Radio. I'm Arjuna Keshwani-Ham, and today we're speaking to Diane Francis. She's a journalist, an author, a broadcaster, and a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. She's also the editor-at-large of the National Post. Diane, thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Now, on Friday, Donald Trump reportedly paused $400 million of weapons aid to Taiwan in what many analysts have said marks a shift or even a U-turn in US policy towards Taiwan. This includes a pause on lethal munitions and autonomous drones, and it came amidst US efforts to negotiate a trade deal with Beijing, and just hours before a phone call between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. It also came in the midst of a major defense expo in Taipei on the weekend. Many analysts have said the outcomes of Friday's call were in China's favor. Now, could Trump be using US support for Taiwan as a bargaining chip in negotiations with China?
Yeah, I think so. There's no point in overreacting to almost anything he does because he does play negotiation games. And what he is doing here, which he's done elsewhere, is deploy strategic ambiguity. In other words, he's not embarrassing China by saying, you should get over trying, we're going to defend Taiwan, how dare you? When in fact, Xi uses Taiwan as a nationalistic narrative for himself in internal politics because he's had to deliver some tough medicine to the Chinese people. And I don't think, neither do I think that he's, quietly abandoning Taiwan either, which would really break with the past. Yes, the negotiations with Taiwan and with China are parallel, but not connected, except that he plays one off against the other. So let me examine, for instance, dropping the military aid to Taiwan is a long-held ambition of his team, the Republican team under Trump. But it's not because they want to abandon Taiwan. It's because they want more military effort to concentrated in terms of Ukraine and Europe. They don't want the military spread too thin because of overuse and over representation in NATO and that sort of region. So Colby, who's his thinker in the Pentagon, and Hegseth, who's his new defense secretary, have often talked about deploying military assets away from China and the same with NATO, and making their various allies pony up their own money. Now, Taiwan is an enormously wealthy place. They've also, not only are they going to, they're required, he said, the deputy, the guy in charge of military policy, Eldridge Colby, said that, when he was confirmed in the Senate that Taiwan should pay 10% of their GDP for their own defense. And they can afford it. It's a very rich place. This was the same sort of refrain that they pushed on to the NATO members, okay? You're now 5% for them. So it's a cost-cutting exercise. At the same time, they're trying to organize this trade deal with China, and they don't want to get China, take too much advantage of China and vice versa. So this is very much taking the Taiwanese piece out of their tariff and trade talks, putting it to the side. And at the same time, Taiwan is being pressured too by the Americans. They have a gigantic company one of the 10 biggest tech companies in the world is Taiwanese. It's Taiwan Semiconductor. They make more semiconductors than any other company in the world, enormously wealthy. And what Trump has extracted from Taiwan in his talks, trade talks with Taiwan, is that Taiwan Semiconductor is going to spend, I hope you're sitting down, $135 billion building new semiconductor plants, moving them from Taiwan, moving them to Germany and to the United States and to Japan. So they're carving up their company and moving it offshore to benefit the allies they hope will protect them and trade with them. And so it's a complicated chess game, but the whole Taiwanese attitude by Trump has been, I think, a strategic sleight of hand.
What if Taiwan isn't being put on the back burner here, and this is the end of security aid to Taiwan, hypothetically, but not obviously the end of Taiwan's own defense spending? How would that affect the military balance across the Taiwan Strait? And is Taiwan simply rich enough not to even be impacted seriously by this?
It can pay the 10% because it'll have to. It's lived off the US in terms of military aid for a long time. Don't forget also that Japan is rearming, South Korea is rearming, and they're allies, and they're all in this together to keep an eye on China. And the Americans, of course, are still in the Pacific theater because they have other allies such as the Philippines and Vietnam and Indonesia and so on. And the real issue in the Pacific is not so much conquering Taiwan, although China would love to do that, but it's keeping the shipping lanes open because they absolutely live or die based on exports and imports, China. So, and so does Japan. So, the point is that the Americans needn't be there to the extent that they always have been. I mean, they still have tens of thousands of troops in South Korea and Japan, and that seems to me kind of crazy and expensive. And so it's just kind of a reallocation. And then Japan is also, and South Korea are also being squeezed in tariff talks by the Trump regime very hard.
According to the Taipei Times, US officials recently told a Taiwanese delegation that although Trump was attempting to normalize or stabilize relations with China, its Taiwan policy still remains unchanged, i.e., the US would continue to offer Taiwan support. Now, Trump's pausing of weapons aid on Friday does seem to contradict that earlier statement given to the Taiwanese delegation by US officials. Now, my question is, if you've got a president who is essentially contradicting the statements of his own officials, in other words, you've got strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan, but you also have this level of Trumpian ambiguity on top of that, do US assurances mean anything at all? And what does this signal to Beijing?
Well, I think that I'd have to examine each of the statements because sometimes it's got the grain of truth in it. Sometimes it's just plain misleading, or he contradicts himself, which has every right to do. I think that basically the attitude is, given all of this business of cutting military aid, pushing Taiwan to spend more on military. I mean, you don't push a country to spend 10% of GDP if you're going to hand it over to China. So what I'm saying, and that sort of thing. And so I think that what we have is China. I think Trump has tried to, and probably pretty well succeeded in removing any thought in China's mind that Taiwan is a bargaining chip. It isn't. He's not going to blatantly and blankly say, as Biden and others have, don't even think about taking over Taiwan. Now, the other thing that's interesting is I have friends in Taiwan. And, it's a very educated, very wealthy, very technologically advanced state. And I always check in with them, get the pulse. Housing prices are going up in Taipei. Everybody's doing just fine. There's no flood of people leaving. Many of them have American passports. So that tells me also that while all of this controversy, is going on around them, that the very bright, very well-adjusted Taiwanese are confident that they're not going to be invaded. That in
And
and of itself doesn't mean anything, but look, the Pacific Fleet is there, Japan is there, Korea is there, and the Americans are there.
If this, as you said, is strategic sleight of hand, trying to get the best possible deal out of Beijing, is there a chance that this lapse of attention or this perceived lapse of attention could still swing in China's favor in the sense that Beijing could exploit this gap, even if that isn't Trump's intention?
Yeah, I don't think anybody can exploit anybody at this point. I think it's just that China that you know China is agreed that Taiwan is the way it is now. It's well enough protected. It's not worth it, and that's fine. Now, what has China gotten in return from Trump? They've gotten some rollback on tariffs. They fought back too and retaliated, so they didn't just take it lying down. But they've also got, I mean, Trump was able to grab TikTok, their most valuable tech giant, and give it to his friends to run and own. I mean, they're going to be paid, but I mean, so he's getting something for this, and so is China. China is not, in my opinion, Taiwan accepted. China is not a conquering empire. It is not a nation that goes around conquering everybody it can get its hands on, like Russia, like Britain was. Uh, let's face it. Now, Taiwan, they're Chinese people. That's different. Hong Kong, they're Chinese people. That's different. But if China was a conquering nation, there would be no Southeast Asia. China is a competing nation, not an enemy nation, in my opinion. And so, as long as it's done business on a business basis, and China doesn't feel threatened, it's not going to act out and take any chess pieces off the board tomorrow. And it's surrounded by nuclear powers as well. I mean, Japan is going to get a nuclear bomb, and so is South Korea, which terrifies the Chinese. I think that it's kind of at a pretty good balance right now, unless somebody does something foolish. But I have never thought of China as an enemy, but as a competitor. Now, Colby and Vance and Hegseth think that China is the devil incarnate and that sort of thing, which is interesting because they've always said that, and yet they're in favor of pulling money out of Taiwan. And that's because Taiwan is probably okay.
Bloomberg estimates that the cost of an invasion of Taiwan would be somewhere around $10 trillion or 10% of the world's GDP. Given this could and would inadvertently affect China as well, is this enough to deter a military takeover of Taiwan in the absence of Washington's support?
I just don't think it's in the cards. Yes, it would be expensive. It would be very terrible. And maybe they would like it, but I just don't see them doing it. It would just bring the wrath of the world down around China's ears at a time when they're trying to recover from a depression, a deep depression in terms of real estate, of debt crisis, all their Belt and Road projects around the world, which cost $1 trillion. They lent the money to the countries, and they're not paying it back. I mean, China's not in great shape. And then, of course, the tariffs by the Americans has also slowed down its economy. And so, I don't see a China wanting to grab a chess piece off the board that would be that expensive. I think it would bankrupt them, and it would absolutely ruin their trade. And that sort of thing they're just too practical. They're not, they're not homicidal, genocidal regime. They're not a homicidal, genocidal regime like Putin.
And coming out of this phone call between Xi and Trump on Friday, how do you see, more broadly, Chinese and US bilateral relations going forward and calibrating into the future, into a continuing Trump term?
Well, I see, Trump being able to do more business with China, but also he's very interested in, and China's very interested in getting China to put pressure on Putin. to stop selling stuff to his war machine. The purchase of cheap oil is a problem. Maybe he wants to make a big oil deal. America produces more oil, almost as much oil as Russia, and it can be put in tankers and shipped across the Pacific. Say, so can LNG. So I think that there'll be all kinds of, business talky talk by Trump to Xi. Uh, She will have to back off any retaliatory tariffs. And I think that, he just kind of needs his diplomatic help. She also needs to, through any talks or public pronouncements that are coming out of a Trump meeting summit, he also has to make it very clear to his other customers, the Europeans, that he isn't, and that he's trying to stop the Russian war in Ukraine. That he is, saying things or putting pressure or diplomatically trying or whatever, because there's a huge backlash against Chinese stuff now in Europe, big backlash. Not so much in the US, but it's big because they are, the closest ally with Iran of Putin's. And so he's got a big geoeconomic challenge ahead of him.